So speak life, when the sun will shine and you don't know why. Look into the eyes of the broken hearted, watch them come alive as soon as you speak hope, you speak love, you speak life.
Hi, and welcome to Dealing with Life. This is a show that happens every single week at this time. I'm Tom Baker, author of One Dog's Faith. We feature guests who have either gone through some serious issues and found victory and the deepened faith through it, or we also feature people who have been called to help others through serious issues and problems. Today is kind of a combination. In the studio with me is Wil Cantrel. Wil is a friend, a very talented pastor at Concord United Methodist Church, and has also written a book, which I really want to feature today because it is talking about some controversies that not only church is dealing with and has been dealing with for a while, but also we deal with in everyday life. So if you're dealing with, struggling with the divisions that are happening in some of the local churches, some of the national churches, or even in society, stick around. I think you'll find this very interesting. Wil, nice to have you along.
It's great to be with you, Tom.
I value our friendship, and I am very respectful of your talents in preaching and dealing with subjects, sensitive subjects, and also faith in general. Introduce us to Wil Cantrel.
Well, I'm a young man with a young growing family. We've got 3 kids, and they're from 8 years old all the way up to almost 2. So it's a lot of fun, never a dull moment, and rarely a quiet moment in our household. They're just great. And,
your kids are adorable.
Well, you're too kind, but I certainly agree wholeheartedly with you. My wife's an amazing lady. We came to Concord United Methodist Church to pastor there 2 years ago, and it was really an amazing experience. We were pastoring at a church in Virginia. We were seeing the community really rally around the church, and things were just going great. We had this opportunity. At first, we weren't sure about it. We prayed about it. We felt the call to pursue it. And my wife had our 3rd child 3 days before we moved to Knoxville.
Oh, my.
We checked out of the hospital and drove to our new house.
With a 0-week-old baby.
And we are still married. And that is a testimony to what a great lady she is.
That talks about strength. That talks about perseverance and yes, patience. Oh wow! And I kind of forgotten that about your story moving here, man. So one thing I know that you are very passionate about is running, and to me, running and faith have a lot in common. Talk about one, your experience with running. And then how it relates to your faith.
Well, they really do. I love especially distance running because after you go so long, if you're going to keep going, you've got to reach down to a pretty deep place. Yeah. And I think it really exposes a lot of things about you. One of the things that helps me in my life take on the challenges that life gives me is I run most days at 5 in the morning. And not every morning is an intense run, but a few times a week there will be rather intense runs. And I like just telling myself, I'm going to challenge myself harder this morning than anybody else is going to be able to challenge me during the day. Oh, so by 7 o'clock, the toughest challenge of my day should be over.
It's already done.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And other people want to give me challenges. That's great. But hey, I've already done the tough stuff. I'm going downhill now. I got involved in running a few years back. Actually, the first time I got involved in running was in college. I'd played on the football team my first 3 years in college, and I kind of saw the handwriting on the wall when a bunch of freshmen went above me on the depth chart. I was getting ready for graduate school, and I thought, well, I'm going to not play my last year, take some time to just get my grades up and where I need to be. Instead, one of the cross-country runners broke his ankle, and they called me a week before the first race and said, do you still work out? Because this is small school. Yeah. We don't have a final runner. My first ever race was 5 miles in Wise, Virginia, and the first 2.5 were down a mountain. The last 2.5 were up a mountain.
Oh, my goodness.
And after those last 2.5, I wondered why I'd ever do this again. But I did it again.
The beginning and the end of your running career.
Exactly. It was all very, very close.
Right, yeah.
Very close. The next week I did it again, and I did it again. By the end of the season, I was middle of the pack, and I realized that this was something I could do. And I had not otherworldly talent, but I had some talent at it.
Yeah.
And then I put it down for about 10 years. Then once again, I ended up in a community where there were a bunch of runners, and they kind of challenged me to come with them some. About 5 years ago, I started doing that. I had a sister-in-law who challenged me to run a half marathon with her, and once I did that, I said, well, I'm close enough. I should do a full marathon. And once I did a full marathon, I said, I'm not that far away from qualifying for the Boston Marathon. I should do that.
The granddaddy of them all.
Yeah. And so I did the Boston Marathon, and I got there, and I said, well, I'm not that far away from getting under 3 hours. I should do that. And I actually ran under 3 hours the first time at Boston. And
wow.
It was just an amazing experience. But here in Knoxville, I run with a club called Knoxville Endurance. And to have other people to run with, but also when you see other people pursuing their goals, and it's just as inspiring to see somebody, run a 5K in under 40 minutes for the first time, as it is to see some of these young guys who will come out and run it under 16 minutes. It's really something else to be a part of. And so I love it because there are a lot of correlations between running and faith and just what you learn about yourself in that process.
One thing that sticks out to me is people expect miracles in this microwave society. And when something goes wrong, they want God to say, here I am. And God, I believe, reveals himself little by little throughout your life, which sounds a lot like a marathon. How does that hit you?
Well, yeah, life is much more like a marathon than like a sprint.
Yeah.
It's always, are you doing the small things that add up over time? And there are these big, incredible moments, but they're also part of this larger narrative that's small and over time and of how God's working. And so there's a lot to that of just, are you continuing to do what you need to do to be open and available to God every day? That's a lot of how I think about prayer, actually.
Okay.
Is that in my daily devotional prayer time, what I'm doing so much is not as much saying, God, you need to show up and talk to me right now. And if during this time that I've set aside to listen to you right now, I don't hear a word, or as I read your word, if I don't know how it applies to me immediately, I'm going to be disappointed. It's more, I'm going to do this every day, God, so that I help myself become sensitive to the way in which you move and the way in which you talk, which you might share with me at another point during the day or several weeks later, or you might share with me during my devotional time.
Yeah, so there's patience.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that running, not every mile is joyous. It is full of glee and I did this.
No. There's some monotony. There's also some just peacefulness of I get to do this. There's the intensity of I'm going as hard as I can and I don't know if I can go any further. There are all kinds of different types of running. But it's interesting you bring that up because I think one of the reasons more people don't run is they go out and they run the first mile and it's awful.
And it stinks.
Yeah.
That's my category right there. My wife loves it.
Well, what I'd say to you is that first mile stinks for everybody.
Right. Okay.
If you become a runner, before you ever run a race, you're going to run a 2-mile warm up. And the first mile of your warm up is always, almost always going to stink.
Okay.
Many people never get to the payoff. They quit while they're revving up their engine and wondering why it's so hard. And then they don't get to experience the joy of once your body's warmed up and ready to go, of just being able to go.
You're not even out of first gear.
Exactly. And really, that's a lot of why I got into it. I was 33 years old. I worked out 3-4 days a week, but I was on a playground watching my kids play, and the way they just take off and run at full speed, I realized I can't do that.
No.
I can't do it. If I did that, my hamstring would snap in two or something, and I thought, That's one of the most natural gifts God's given us, is simply the joy of being able to take off and run. And I can't do it. And I'm not ready to give that up for the rest of my life. I want to see if I can learn to do that again.
How about that? Yeah. So I want to get into the book, but one thing I want to talk about real quickly is your involvement with Concord United Methodist, this tremendously growing church. Tell listeners a little bit about the church and where it's going.
Yeah, it's an incredible church because it's this church that's been around since 1865, the end of the Civil War, and has consistently made changes to how it did church to reach a changing culture.
Okay.
And so today when you come to church, it's incredible to be a part of a community. There's going to be about 900 people there, cross-generational. Some churches it's just over 40. And some churches, there's nobody over 60.
Right.
It's going to be all generations. There's going to be a really big, dynamic, contemporary worship service with drums and guitars. And there's also going to be a really big, passionate, traditional service with a choir and with an organ, because this church is just interested in reaching people where they are. And it's just off Kingston Pike in the Farragut area behind Sam and Andy's. But even though it's right there near Kingston Pike, you can't see it. And a lot of people just can't believe there's a church this big back in the neighborhood.
Yeah.
But the reason that many people have found that church back in the neighborhood is because that's a church that's committed to going out into its community, committed to saying, we're not just here for ourselves. We're here to bless others. And through feeding ministries, tutoring ministries, mentoring ministries, construction ministries, support group ministries, whatever it might be. So many people go out and realize that this faith community that we have is to be shared, and it's something that we all need. Just like in running, if you run with others, it's so much easier.
Right.
Same way in faith, exact same way. Most people, if they try it on their own, it's going to be hard. If you try it with others, it's going to be so much easier, so much more fulfilling.
Yeah, the church has so many opportunities. No matter what your interest, there's an opportunity to do some kind of ministry.
Oh, there absolutely is. And my role there is I'm one of the preaching pastors, along with our senior pastor, Larry Trotter. So we're both generally preaching during the week. And when we're not, we have other pastors on staff who probably do an even better job than us, which is wonderful.
That's great.
And then I also, at the church, I look over some of our communication initiatives, how we communicate with our community, and also how we listen to our community.
Awesome. So what we're going to get into in a minute, I want you to introduce your book. This is a powerful and I'll call it a needed book. It's called Unafraid and Unashamed: Facing the Future of United Methodism. And just a brief statement. Tell listeners what it's about, but we're going to get into the meat and potatoes here in a second. What it's about?
Well, what the book is about is within the United Methodist Church, we're wrestling with issues that have already split most of the other major Protestant denominations within our country.
Okay.
Social issues about human sexuality, some other political issues as well. And we're wrestling with, is there a way with our different ways of seeing these issues, with our different ways of reading certain passages of the Bible, that we can stay together and faithfully do ministry? Or has it come to the point where we would spend too much time arguing with each other and not enough time reaching out to the world? As well as this book addresses not just those issues, but perhaps the even more crucial issues that sometimes get pushed aside because we can't find a resolution for these issues, which is how our world is changing and our culture is changing, and how the world needs the church and needs faith as much as ever, absolutely as much as ever, but it's not going to receive that when it's communicated in the same method it always has been. So to look at what do we have to do so we can tell the old story in new ways for a new day for new people.
To reach the hearts of people.
Exactly.
Absolutely. We are going to dive straight into that here in a moment, and I want you to stick around because you'll want to hear it. This is Dealing with Life. I'm Tom Baker, author of One Dog's Faith. We'll deal with that in a minute.
Voice of truth says do not be afraid, and the voice of truth says do this is for my glory. What will I say when I'm held to the flame like I am right now? I know you're able and I know you can save through the fire with your mighty hand. But even if you don't, my hope is you alone.
Whether by accident or strictly on purpose, you have found a show called Dealing with Life. Really terrific to have you along for the ride. I'm Tom Baker, author of One Dog's Faith. That's a book about life, about trust, about worry through the eyes of a dog. If you're a dog lover, or if you're a worrier, or a little bit of both, or a lot of both, I think you'll like it a lot. One Dog's Faith is available through Amazon. It's also on barnesandnoble.com. It's also available through Cedar Springs Bookstore, Long's Drugstore, Farragut Pharmacy, among many others. Okay, plug over. In the studio today with me is Wil Cantrel, a pastor, a good friend, and also author of a brand new book just released called Unafraid and Unashamed, Facing the Future of United Methodism. Glad to have you here, and I really want to get into the meat of this.
Well, thank you. It's great to be here.
And you kind of told us a little bit about the general intent of the book, and I think this book. I think you originally meant it for churches, but it applies to everybody.
Yeah, as we began developing the book, what we found out is that what we were talking about on the surface level as happening within the United Methodist Church was really what's happening within our society. Is we have these divisions, and how do we relate to one another across the divisions, and how do we love one another across the divisions, and how do we listen to one another across the divisions, and which divisions kind of need to be there, and which divisions really need to be destroyed. And so
right. I want to read. There's a couple of passages that I want to read, and then you can respond. I think this is a great starting point. This out of your book, it says, we develop biases based on height, weight, skin tone, hair, accent, profession, gender, nationality, disability, sexual orientation, political affiliation, religious affiliation, age, and more. And even as far as which part of town you live in, fans of opposing sports team. We as humans really try to find division.
We do. Our brain is structured to categorize, and so if we can categorize people, it makes life simpler, it makes it easier to manage. And while some of that goes back to our old fight or flight issues when we're just trying to survive, some of it becomes incredibly harmful because we fail to see the humanity in each other, and we fail to really respect each other sometimes.
Right.
So I think the best thing we can do is to just be aware of those biases and be aware of what they are, and that they're always a possibility for all of us. I've never met an unbiased person. I wouldn't trust one if they told me they were.
Agreed, because we try to understand things, and I guess that's our way of doing it. So, in your opinion, is there a compromise? Is there a way to somehow find love through this?
Well, I know there's a way to find love through this. I'm anxiously awaiting to see if there's a way we can, within United Methodism, that we can stay together in one denominational policy structure.
Yeah.
But I know there's a way we can find love, and that's going to be the tragedy. The tragedy isn't if we need to create new structures to help diverse types of churches be more effective in their ministries. The tragedy is going to come in if we start to look at each other as the enemy, and we start to think that the other is the real problem.
Yeah. Oh, that's hard.
It is, because then all we do is we massage our egos by surrounding ourselves with people who already think like us, and we get more and more in our corner. And even if our corner is right on that issue, by failing to relate to our brothers and sisters who see things differently, we lose perspective on many other things that they might be right about, and we lose that relationship, which, I mean, the whole story of the Christian Bible is the story of relationship. I mean, as Christians, not to go too deep into the theology, but actually to jump about as deep as you can go real quick.
Right.
We believe God's Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. I mean, 3 persons, one God. God's a relationship, and God created us for a relationship. That's the very first part of the creation story, is not that man's supposed to do all this work. It's how man's supposed to relate to God and to one another and to this earth we've been given. That's the whole thing.
That's it. That's all of
that's
it.
it.
And, some people think the Old Testament's so difficult to understand and it's full of rules, but it's all about us falling away from God and hating each other.
Very, very much so. The whole question that resounds throughout the whole Old Testament is that one that begins with Cain and Abel. Am I my brother's keeper?
Yeah.
And then Jesus challenges us so much on that, on saying, okay, who's your brother? And, oh, by the way, you're still your brother's keeper when your brother does wrong. And you're still your brother's keeper when your brother's ignorant.
Ouch.
And you're still your brother's keeper when your brother intentionally hurts you. Yeah, he calls it loving your neighbor, but I think we could take it back to Cain and Abel and call it being your brother's keeper. Absolutely.
So I think we can relate this to this somewhat still current political situation. The politics of either you're on my side or I hate you through this last election was so amplified by social media. And I think that's part of the problem that we've got to deal with as a church in this issue. I mean, it's so, everybody wants to voice their opinion now.
Well, they do, and every voice does need to be heard. But one of the things that happens on social media is these social media companies, they create algorithms. And those algorithms put the power of millions of dollars worth of computers into trying to only give you information that you will like, because therefore you will read it.
Oh my.
And so we're not talking to each other like we used to. We're talking to people who already think like us, and then we become more ingrained in that. And I don't want to minimize these issues. I don't want to say, everybody just calm down, it's not that big a deal. That's not a faithful way.
It is a big deal.
It's a big deal. And these issues and how we handle them have life and death consequences for people. They are life and death issues. And yet I look in the gospel, and Jesus loved people who he disagreed with on life and death issues.
What?
Yeah.
Really?
And he had disciples within his 12 who disagreed with one another vehemently on life and death issues.
Right.
And so I would hate to push someone out of my personal fellowship and out of what I consider true Christianity because we disagree on a life and death issue, because that doesn't seem to square with the way Christianity began when you go back to the Christ from who it all comes from.
But how come it has become, and I know this isn't a new thing, but it just seems so fresh that if you don't disagree, if you don't agree with me with the way I think about life, about gender issues or whatever, then you're wrong. And what do we do with that?
I think what I wish we could do would be develop the virtue of humility and curiosity. For instance, let's take the sexuality issues.
Okay.
We all have strong opinions about those. Most folks do. And I look at that and I think, okay, human sexuality is one of the great mysteries of existence.
Right.
For me, I had to ask myself, do I understand my own sexuality completely? I understand I'm heterosexual. I understand that my sexuality is a great gift that leads to intimacy when expressed in certain confines within the context of marriage. Mm-hmm. And when I don't allow my eyes to look at certain things and my thoughts to go certain places outside of that context.
Right.
But do I understand everything about it? Can I even rationally understand why I look at my wife and think she's beautiful? By the way, honey, if you're listening, you're the most beautiful woman in the world. It's far beyond reason.
Right.
Yeah. But can I logically understand that? Some scientists will come up and say, well, it's your evolutionary desire to replicate your DNA. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that doesn't quite square with me.
Agreed.
To fully explain it. And so if I can't even fully explain myself, to think that I can fully explain someone else and tell them exactly kind of how they should be and how they should do.
Right.
It makes me take a step back and say, maybe instead of trying to say what should be and what should do, in a lot of these conversations, the best I can do is say, tell me about yourself. Tell me. And what we find is that when we enter into those conversations with people who are very different than us, and let me tell you, in researching for this book, one of the great blessings was I got to talk to people who were very different than me on both sides of the issue.
I'm sure.
I mean, and had life experiences.
What a journey.
Yeah. I mean that was really one of the great gifts of the whole journey, as you point out. And you look at that and you suddenly see, I might not be able to resonate with what you're saying. I might not be able to agree with what you're saying, but I can appreciate your journey. And I can love you within your journey. And what that is? That's just being family. I mean, when you sit down to Thanksgiving dinner with your extended family, I would think for all our listeners, there are people that you know at that table, that there are issues that you will never agree with them on. You will go to your grave disagreeing with them on.
Just don't want to talk about it right there at the table, but it's there.
But they're family. Yeah. And that doesn't stop you from loving them. It doesn't stop you from...
Agreed.
Even sometimes being able to see beauty within their point of view and within the way they live their life, though you disagree strongly with it, you can see beauty and good within it sometimes.
That's huge. All right, we're going to make a bookmark here, but there's plenty more to talk about. Again, the book is called Unafraid and Unashamed: Facing the Future of United Methodism. Wil Cantrel's with me, and we're going to talk more on dealing with life in just a second.
Just hold on to the promises. Hold on to the promises. Jesus is alive, so hold tight. Hold on to the promises. You alone are the anchor when my sails are torn. Your love surrounds me in the eye of the storm.
You're listening to a show called Dealing with Life. I'm Tom Baker, author of One Dog's Faith. This is a show that features people who have gone through issues and have found victory in the deepened faith, and also people who have been called not only to help others, but also talk about difficult places and decisions. With me today is Wil Cantrel, respected pastor in our community, and also a good friend of mine. Wil, nice to have you. You've written a book, and we've talked about it a good bit, but I want to dig deeper. It's called Unafraid and Unashamed: Facing the Future of United Methodism. For those who haven't been with us so far, quick synopsis.
Okay, the book on the surface level is about the United Methodist denomination, the denomination I grew up in that really shaped me in the faith, that where I found Christ, where I found a community committed to offering Christ, but a community that's wondering if it can all stay together. Most of the major denominations in our country have split over social issues and issues of liberal, conservative, biblical interpretation. Mm-hmm. The United Methodist Church has stayed together, which makes us very diverse, but part of the word...
Also ripe for the picking.
Exactly. So we've now reached a point where we're really wondering if we can go forward, and the kind of presenting issue is around human sexuality and LGBTQ inclusion, with the differing views, and could an LGBTQ person be an ordained pastor? Would there be same-sex marriages in churches? And very different views on that from across the spectrum, and how we should teach about this to our young people as they come up. How can we handle that diversity of thought? And then there's even a greater question of beyond, is this just disagreement about social issue, or is it fundamental theology and biblical interpretation and beliefs that diverge, Or are those still within the spectrum that can hold us together? It's just we disagree about this issue. So there's a lot that's going on to wonder about.
I think media today, whether it's network television, whether it's Netflix or the like, there is no filter at all. Anything they want to talk about, any social issue, any sexuality issue, they just come out and do it. You can't even watch a commercial without some kind of social issue being pushed. So our kids, we can't hide from it. So we got to talk about it.
No, and if we do so to our own detriment. That we just try to be a little squeamish, keep our hands off, not address a taboo, and what we become is irrelevant to people who are wrestling with this every day.
Yeah, it's head on. So talk to us about the stakes. What does this mean to the church?
Well, there's a lot that goes into this. Right now within United Methodism, last year we met, and every 4 years we have a general conference, and that general conference writes our church law and sets our official beliefs. And we got into a conflict over these issues that really had been going for 40 years. And if you read the book, it takes you through that whole 40-year process so that you kind of see how people thought at different points. And
right.
It's amazing to look at, because we think this is an issue now, but to look back that it's always been this issue for the last 40 years, and to see there have been different thoughts about it that seem to be a little more dominant or a little more strong at different points. It hasn't always been seen exactly the same way.
And that's a fascinating part of the book. And that's how you begin the book.
Yeah, the beginning of the book is kind of that history, and it just takes you on that roller coaster journey.
Yeah.
And then plops you down in the present day. And we almost got to a point last year where we had like 3 days left, and it looked like we might come apart. And so we said, let's spend 3 years on this rather than 3 days. And that's what happened. We appointed a special commission, an incredibly diverse group, diverse across the world, diverse in their viewpoints, and said, come together and help us see, is there a way forward? They're meeting right now. They should eventually, within a year or so, have their report. And then 2019, we'll get together to say, what is the way forward for us as a denomination, and what can that look like? But let me tell you what the stakes are with how we deal with this is that nothing in the local church drives people away from faith more than conflict within your local church.
Agreed.
And conflict within a denomination can have the same effect. There are many people right now who are in the United Methodist Church who come from denominations who went through a conservative liberal hard split, and they were wounded by it.
It's difficult to understand.
Yes, yeah, and they spent many years outside the church, and now they found a new one where they can be a part of a faith community again. There's also a lot at stake in just when you look at the organizational structure of the church. Let's say something happens and people within congregations feel forced to decide one way or the other. Well, what happens when you have a church of 500 and 250 people leave, and now instead of asking the question of how can we reach out to the community, those 250 who stay look at the mortgage and the light bill and say, right, how do we take care of this building?
Sure.
And Christianity isn't supposed to be about buildings, but
there are realities.
There are, and you have to deal with those. So both in the effect of the church reaching out to the community and the personal faith of those within the church. And one thing I'd say to those who are listening today, and maybe you've been through a church that has had conflict,
yeah,
and you've become somewhat disillusioned by it. I'd say this: the question we should be asking about the church is not, is the church perfect? Because the church is made up of people, and for it to be perfect, all of us would have to be kicked out.
Me first.
Well, I'd be right behind you. I tell you what. However, the question we should ask about church is, was it Jesus' idea? Was it Jesus' idea, or was it his disciples' idea? I think the Gospels are pretty clear. It was Jesus' idea.
Yeah.
And if it's Jesus' idea, is it worth doing? And I would argue yes. I would also argue that he knew it would be messy. So not to get disillusioned because of what Jesus' present-day disciples wrestle with and sometimes get wrong, but to realize if it's his idea, then it's worth being a part of, because even when it's messy, and even if I might have to sometimes find another church to be a part of, this is how he helps us grow, and this is how he calls us to serve.
Right. It's a place to not only develop your journey, but as you pointed out so eloquently a while ago, it's a family. And families help each other in struggle and decisions, and in a search of meaning of your own life, and in a search of how to deal with serious problems. And the stakes are real. And what do we do? That's the question.
Yeah, and I think what we have to do within that is we have to get very intentional about, one, listening to each other, understanding how this affects us personally and how it affects us on a global level.
Yeah.
One of the interesting things about the United Methodist Church that is a little different from the other denominations within our country is we're a global church. We're not just an American church, but within the past 30 years, United Methodism has exploded globally. I mean, 30 years ago, roughly 90% of all United Methodists were within the United States.
Okay.
And a few years before that, it was 97 or 98%. Today, less than 60% of United Methodists are within the United States.
How about that?
And within just a decade or two, it's going to be less than 50. And we are really rapidly becoming a beautiful global denomination. But within that comes more diversity of thought, the need for more diversity of practice to relate to certain cultures.
Right. But it's also strength. And it's also, we as Americans, sometimes we get so proud and we just think we're the only thing there is. Man, that when you look at it on a global basis, it makes talking about this, more important.
It does, because you know what the vision of heaven is in the book of Revelation, the last book of the Bible. It says that when they enter this new Jerusalem, that all the nations will enter. Like
not just Americans.
No, it's this massive parade with all the nations. And so you think, well, when we learn what it is to love within this broader spectrum, what we're doing is we're preparing ourselves for heaven.
Wow. Now, this vision, a lot of people, and sometimes I catch myself, when you think global, you think everybody else hates us, the USA, because we're so high and mighty and proud and whatever, but they don't. And this is proof of that the Methodist Church is so global that there is love out there.
Oh, there absolutely is. And it's an amazing thing when I've gone to different countries and you're struggling to talk sometimes, but you see that, hey, we have this in common. And sometimes it's just seeing the cross around your neck or something like that. And there's this incredible connection that takes place.
Hey, we're family.
Yeah.
Wow, that's so powerful. Wil Cantrel is in the studio with me. Again, the author of Unafraid and Unashamed, a very powerful book, a book that deals head-on with social issues that are dividing our church and how unity can still happen. We can love and still have differences. I'm Tom Baker, author of One Dog's Faith. This is Dealing with Life, and we'll deal with more in just a moment.
And it is beautiful and tragic, different verse but same old song. Sometimes the only thing you learn is that life keeps moving on.
You're listening to Dealing with Life. I'm Tom Baker, author of One Dog's Faith. We're so glad you're along with us for the ride. In the studio with me today is Wil Cantrel, pastor at Concord United Methodist Church, also author of the book Unafraid and Unashamed, Facing the Future of United Methodism, a very important socially relevant book. Thank you for coming in and talking to us about it. Some final thoughts on this book. I think it's most important to talk about the challenges and also the opportunities that face not only our church but social problems and issues.
Well, it certainly is. And as we've talked about some of those issues that have the potential to divide the United Methodist Church, one of the reasons I wrote the book was because when people came to talk to me about those, and as you know, our church is full of very diverse people.
Yeah.
Concord United Methodist really has a diverse congregation. So as I've wrestled with that, I found that as they came to me, I would figure out what I thought they wanted me to say. And I was very tempted just to say back what I thought they wanted.
What they wanted to hear.
But I wanted to give them something deeper. I wanted to be able to really engage the conversation on a deep level, and I wanted to help other pastors and churches do that as well. But there was more to the book than just that. The other part of that was to talk about the opportunities and this wonderful heritage as United Methodists and as Christians that we've been given, but the changing culture. And what it means to communicate the same gospel with the same core beliefs in a new day and a new age, in a new way for new people. Now, as you know, I'm 38 years old. And so in church, I feel like I've been doing this pastor thing for a long time.
Right.
But some people still come up to me and they're like, oh, it's so great to have a young pastor. And they'll say, hey, you're young. And what I've learned, what they mean when you're young is your hair's not gray yet and you don't have a beard. So I think that's why they could consider me super young.
Yeah.
Or it's just that this is the first time they've ever had a pastor younger than them. And so they're kind of working through those issues themselves.
Sure.
At any rate, they'll say to me, hey, look at all these changes in our culture. How should we reach people? And one of the things
and I know they're talking about how do we reach today's generation.
Exactly.
Yeah.
One of the things I tell them is I say, how should I know? When I graduated from seminary about 15 years ago, our country, not the world, but our country, the United States, was only half as diverse as it is today. That these groups that study the different people groups within the United States say that we had 40 distinct people groups 15 years ago. Today, they identify 71.
Oh, my.
And so how do you communicate that? And one of the real challenges as we look at 71 different cultures within what we call America is that most churches and most denominations were set up to reach a specific culture. Like the United Methodist Church, in its origins, was set up to reach a frontier culture and a British culture.
Okay.
And we've been wrestling ever since with what to do with there's not a frontier and we're not all British anymore, right?
Well, but goodness, when you talk about 70 cultures, that's exciting, and that's wonderful, but that's also challenging.
It is, and what I think we need to do within that is move and help our local churches move from this idea of having kind of a brand church. Like if you've ever been to a brand hotel like Holiday Inn Express, you know that every holiday, it doesn't matter if it's in Gatlinburg or Hong Kong. Holiday Inn Express is Holiday Inn Express.
Yes, you know what to expect.
You know what to get. But you also have boutique hotels. You know, if you go to a town and you stay in a boutique hotel, it is unique to that town, and there's nothing else like it anywhere.
Right.
Well, a lot of our churches were set up just to do church in one place exactly like you do church in another place. And more we need to say, instead of being brand churches, how can we be boutique churches?
I love
how
that.
can we do churches for this culture in this place to reach
this
these
neighborhood
people?
and yes.
And maybe by learning how to do church in this local place, we'll learn some lessons about how to do it globally.
How powerful. Again, the name of the book, Unafraid and Unashamed, Facing the Future of United Methodism. Author is with me today, Wil Cantrel, pastor of Concord United Methodist Church. And also, really, I want to make sure we understand, where can a person get this?
It's available on Cokesbury.com. It's also available on Amazon. The Kindle version is out, so if you like reading it in digital format, that's available for you. And of course, you're welcome to stop by Concord United Methodist Church and pick up a copy. We're located in the Farragut area of Knoxville, and we're in the Thornton Heights neighborhood just behind the Sam and Andy's on Kingston Pike.
Wow, you might even sign it.
I bet I would.
Thank you so much for being here today and talking about this. It's like I said it up front, it's a needed book.
Well, thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure to talk with you and to be able to discuss these subjects.
Absolutely. This is Dealing with Life. I'm Tom Baker, author of One Dog's Faith. We do this show every single week at this time, and we enjoy you being a part of it. If you're dealing with issues, just remember one thing. God is there, and God loves you tremendously. He will walk with you. All you got to do is reach your hand out. This is Dealing with Life. I'm Tom Baker. Allow God to turn your struggles into strength, your pain into power, and your battles into blessings. God bless you.
It's been